When Earth Priest was still a young man, my grandfather, a railroad telegrapher at the time, came 30 miles up the line from his Great Bend station to explore this Sweetwater Lake. He immediately loved this clear lake, heart of the wilderness, and especially the trout, which were its jeweled essence, though much of that essence was already gone. As the bass had prospered, the trout had begun to disappear. Someone dumped a bait can of perch minnows into the lake. The perch grew, multiplied, and thrived on a diet of trout eggs. Wall-eyed pike began to appear in the deeper water haunts left by the trout. The last of those trout distantly descended from the original landlocked Arctic char, a monster dying of a buoyant mold which forced it to swim at the surface, was finally killed by the prop of one of the first outboard motors. Though he was never to get a trout from this lake, my grandfather got one of the first outboard motors, took a job as foreman at Benson Mines, and married Vera Drury, the young only child of the doctor from Natural Bone. He bought a cottage from among the new rank of them on Priest Shore in the shelter of Rock Island, and then my mother was born, his only child, another daughter of the lake. While he changed professions again to open a drugstore and then a garage in Natural Bone, my grandfather became and remained a serious pike fisherman. At the lake he had a fishing partnership and competition with Doc Howe, an osteopath from Natural Bone who lost his legs in World War I, but returned to fish with the energy and dedication of someone saving lives. His equipment was of surgical quality, and he could smell fish through the water even with a cigar in his mouth, or so he would say, and then lead you to them. Fishing together and apart, Doc and my grandfather brought in the largest of their great northern and wall-eyed pike to have the outlines traced on the side of a shed at Priest Marina. Since Doc had a horror of falling, a wooden leg and an outboard at night, he fished only in the daytime, and so he dominated the competition for northern pike, which are mostly day feeders, while my grandfather brought in the night-sighted walleyes. While Doc gave casting lessons to kids behind his trailer, my grandfather stocked the lake with a few milk cans full of rock bass and sunfish so that there'd be plenty of panfish for the kids to catch. It was getting crowded at that shore of the lake since the railroad had come, and a new paved road was crowding it faster by 1928. My grandfather was around 50 then, and his daughter was about to marry her high school sweetheart, my father, as it turned out, who had been attending college but was working summers around the new restaurant on Rock Island. It was during the summer of 1928 that my grandfather came fishing and sounding this wilder part of the lake. Until he came along, nobody had much noticed the smaller island across from Bull Rock Point and Round Island. It was separated from the mainland only by a narrow neck of water, thick with cattails and the bleached standing bones of drowned pines. My grandfather used an oar to pull his way through this passage and into a bay that Loon Island shares with its satellite, which the generation after mine has taken to calling Turtle Island. Not just because it's shaped as much as any like a turtle, but also because it's where the local snapping turtles climb up to bury their eggs. Without even getting out of the boat, my grandfather could see the white, wrinkled shards of turtle eggs in the coarse, pitted sand that topped the little island, and wedged between two underwater rocks off the edge of the island, he saw a perfectly round turtle egg, lost since the cow turtle missed her sand pit with the first or last egg, pickled in Bonaparte since last spring. My grandfather came up on the little island and leaned off the rocks to collect the turtle egg. He pocketed the egg as an amulet for the occasion, but he didn't think of naming Turtle Island. He looked back at the island which he had just circumnavigated and thought what a good place it would be for a boathouse. He rowed across the sheltered bay to make a landing on the one piece of dry, flat shoreline. climbed up on the island's gradual rise through leafy trees to the open piney bluff which faced the lake. And here, 20 feet from where I years later found the broken spear point of some primitive hunter, my grandfather carved his initials and the date, H.A.F. 1928, on a birch tree, and then went off to buy the island from a logger who had taken over much of Zebulon Benton's portion. As a wedding present, my grandfather's grandparents gave the little island to my parents, who called it Little Loon Island, after naming the other Loon Island, after the loons who usually give it a wide berth and who, like us, would prefer to be only one or two families to a lake. But ever since my grandfather claimed the island, everyone outside of our own family has called it Failings Island, after my grandfather. This is a story for him.